Okay, so starting at 10 o'clock, we're going to hear from Linda Manimtim. She's the instructional designer for the Language Training Center at Red River College Polytechnic in Winnipeg. Before specializing in designing online learning materials, Linda taught EAL, French, and communications in Quebec, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, and in England. She's completed a B.Ed at McGill and an M.Ed at the University of Alberta. She grew up in Quebec, and she will legitimately fight you on what kind of cheese to use on poutine. So maybe save that discussion for last. But anytime you'd like to get started now or at 10 a.m., Linda, we welcome your presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I am happy to get started now because I do talk a lot and very quickly, just in case anyone is wondering. If anyone has met me before, you probably know. I see a few familiar names in the chat, so I'm grateful that you're willing to even listen to me again. And if you're new or if I've never met you before, thank you so much for being here. I am so honored and excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Ties. It's a great topic. It's important, it's emergent, it's ongoing, and I am clearly very excited to talk about e-learning and digital tools. Before I get started, though, I do want to acknowledge that as I am in Manitoba, the campuses that I work at, RC Polytech, are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, the Inuak, the Anishinaabeg, the Dakota, and the Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Red River Métis Nation. And as an institution and as individuals ourselves, we try our best to respect the treaties that were made on these territories. And we are trying to dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So as Whitney very kindly and graciously introduced me, I am an instructional designer at Red River College Polytechnic with the Language Training Center. Just for my sake, I'm watching the chat. Who has ever worked with an instructional designer before? I would really appreciate a yes or a no in the chat, if you don't mind. Who has worked with an instructional designer before? Well, I'm glad to hear that, Allison. I can't speak for all of us out there, but I know that some are good. Thanks, Stuart. I hope so. And Sagar, good. Okay, good to know. A class on it. Well, we could trade notes later for sure. Well, what does an instructional designer do? Well, for the most part, we are generally techie people. We are responsible normally for taking content and putting it into online or print materials to aid in instruction. That's what I love to do, and I'm a huge geek about it. So I'm excited to talk about the tools that we use for teaching and for developing. Now, that's not all I am, though. Previous to becoming an instructional designer, I was a LINC teacher and an EAL teacher, and I have lived in many, many places. And so a fun fact about me is I am excellent at eating all kinds of carbohydrates. I will eat all the rice, all the potatoes, and any other carb you will throw at me, which was a little bit of a problem during the pandemic for me. So let's get started here with this picture. This might trigger some of you, so apologies in advance, but which one of these technologies did you hate the most in previous teaching years? Just pop your answer into the chat, assuming you recognize some of these. Please don't make me feel super old and not recognize any. Which one of these did you hate the most? Chalkboard, I sympathize. I have just gotten rid of clothes that still have that white line on the butt. The overhead projector, my kids don't understand me when I talk about that. Do you not miss writing with whiteboard markers on the acetate though? I thought that was pretty fun. It seems like chalkboard so far is the winner of the most hated. Although the Xerox machine or the photocopier seem to be quite annoying at times. Well, to follow up on that, this is all technology, right? Which modern technology that you might be using right now gives you the most trouble as a teacher? Which modern digital technology gives you the most trouble right now as an instructor, a teacher, administrator? We did the reverse, Allison. We switched to Teams from WebEx. But switching is always painful, not just for people who work as instructors or administrators, but for students as well, for sure. Computers in general can be unpredictable. Internet connections. And, we should acknowledge that not everyone has access to high-speed internet. So a lot of the things that we choose to use are dependent on the speed of the internet that our end user has. Moodle quizzes, quizzes in general. The programming of quizzes can be quite fun. And by fun, I mean frustrating. So there's all kinds of tech in general and specific tools that might just get on your nerves or just might fail you, betray you in the most important moment of your instructional career. So this is an ongoing problem. It's not something new. But what is kind of emerging now is that we have so many tools at our disposal, free and paid. But one thing we need to remember is that the purpose is not just to use all of the tools at our disposal. The purpose, and I think Heidi Hayes Jacobs puts it really well in this quote, is that teachers need to integrate technology seamlessly into the curriculum. Instead of viewing it just as an add-on, an afterthought, or an event. We speak about learning experiences a lot in instructional design, but the technology is just a vehicle for the learning experience. It's not the end purpose in and of itself, even though as a geek, I do get excited by different technologies. So what is the issue with too many tools? Why did I call this presentation Too Many Tools? Well, it's because there are too many tools to choose from. And the issue is that we don't have enough time or money to spend exploring them, deciding, is this really the right tool? Some of us just have time for a quick Google search. What's a good presentation software? And then we just choose the first one that pops up, because who's got time to really get through the nitty-gritty of each application that we think might work in our class? So I have an acronym for you, 3 tips for choosing digital tools for teaching, and it is ACE. ACE is my acronym, and it stands for Analyze, Curate, and Evaluate. 3 steps or 3 tips for choosing digital tools for the classroom. And the first one is analyze. Now, I'm an instructional designer, so I'm kind of annoying sometimes because often when we have a development project, everyone wants to dive in. You want to just choose things, make things, create things. We have lots of talented people all over the country making cool things. But first, we need to stop and we need to analyze. Think about your context, because what happens when you don't complete just even a rudimentary analysis? Anyone want to guess? Or just hazard some experiences? What happens when you don't complete an analysis before choosing a tool? Pop your ideas into the chat box. I'm looking at you, Allison. It may not meet your needs. And yeah, you bring up a good point as well about devices, which we'll talk about later. Chaos implementation. I'm going to steal that expression, Whitney, just giving you a heads up. Absolutely. Does anyone remember GeoCities? GeoCities was the mother of all chaos, and I am going to hurt your eyes just for a minute, just because I can, and show you this one little website. This is what happens when you don't do an analysis, because everything is so cool. You try to plunk it all into one situation or experience, and it looks like this. And I'll pop out of it now because it might give some people a headache. So you don't have focus. It is chaos. So we have to think about things in terms of analysis. Let me show you here that there is no unicorn tools. I'm sorry to break it to you. It's a hard truth, but there are no unicorn tools. There is no one perfect digital instructional tool that will fit all of your needs. So we have to implement a bit of backwards design, which means you look at your end outcome, your end goal, and you pick the specific tool that fits that hole or that fits that outcome. And to do that for analysis, we think about 3 things. I recommend you think about 3 things: your audience, your outcomes, and the constraints that will limit your choices. So the first thing is your audience. Who are your learners? Who are they? We have such a vast diversity of learners now within classes and across programs. Think about their goals. Are they doing something primarily for community? Are they doing it to make connections? Are they doing it for fun? We do have people who are just in conversation classes for fun. Or are they in a specific program for a specific workplace English goal? What is their language ability? That will dictate which tool you choose. I'm thinking in particular about websites, because we have a lot of great grammar websites. For example, I'm sure you've used many. Some of those, unfortunately, are covered in predatory advertisements that someone with a lower level of digital literacy or lower language ability might have trouble distinguishing a predatory ad from actual content. So it might dictate which website you choose. Accessibility needs, what are the size of the fonts? What are the backgrounds of the page? All of those things will dictate which kind of application you use. Let me give you an example. Has anyone used Kahoot or Slido? Just a yes or a no in the chat box. Kahoot or Slido? Yes. See, I love both of these tools. Both of these tools have their place. But take a look at those screenshots. This is just a random question taken from some random Kahoots and a Slido. You can definitely tell that there's a difference in audience, right? Kahoot is fantastic, but how many times do you just want to turn off, and you can actually secret, turn off that music? The music is stressful, and it's also aimed at a younger audience. Kahoot was actually developed with a younger audience in mind. You can tell by the primary colors, by the trophies and awards. Slido, has anyone used Slido? I see that some people have used both. Slido has a much more corporate feel to it. Yeah, the blues, the way that the poll is created, much like a professional Microsoft Teams form would look like. They've got different purposes, different audiences. Neither is wrong. It just depends on the situation. Thinking about the goals of your learners and what they would appreciate and that would appeal to them. I can tell you that Kahoot has not really offended some of my students in the past, but irritated them with how it feels, because they were set on something quite different. It wasn't fun for them. They wanted something that looked a little bit more professional. Again, no wrong answers, just depends on your context. Another thing to think about is your outcomes. What is your focus of your instruction? Which skills do you need to address? What is the purpose of your technology? Because there's no point in using technology if you don't actually have a defined purpose, a defined outcome for using it. Thinking about reading versus forest skills, or reading in general. Let's take a look at this. There are axes for cutting down trees, and there are scalpels for very specific goals. And which one do you want? If you've heard of ESL Library, you know that that is a great resource for instructors, but it is not the right resource for all things. If you've heard of ESL for You, a website, it's a great resource depending on your language level and digital literacy skills, but it's not for every skill. Let's say that you wanted to focus particularly on reading. I'm just going to click to this website very quickly. This is the reading page of the BBC, right? There are lots of activities here at different levels. Maybe this is what you want. You want something that addresses different levels where you can differentiate between learners so people can go to whatever level they are. And you want them to learn about a poster at work. So you go through the preparation activities. Apologies if I'm scrolling really quickly. There's a poster, and then there's tasks built for that. Fantastic resource, absolutely. But what if that is the axe to you? And maybe you don't want all of that. All you want is thematic, CLB aligned reading activities. For example, the CBC Learning English. Let's just take a look at level 1, for example. Here we've got things with audio that add audio to it and aligned by level. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe that's the scalpel that you need. Or perhaps you don't want to just focus on general reading. You want something even more specific. You want a speed reading test. You want people to be aware of their reading speed. I'm not going to click on this. This is included in the PowerPoint. I'll give you the links later. But basically, it's just a single reading speed test, academic in nature. Maybe that's what you need. Or maybe not. Maybe what you need is a leveled thematic test. These are all more precise objectives used for different things. Let me just give you this example right here. Complexity level. Let's go to level 1 just to show you what that looks like. Oh, there you go. and begin. There we go. This is a level 1 from this website. You click done reading, you do the test, and I am not going to come up with a very good score. You notice as well, though, on this ACE reader that there are advertisements. So these are the kind of tools that you just weigh the pros and the cons. Does it fit the need that you want? And can you work around things like advertisements? So constraints are the things that people usually get hung up on, but it's just one of those 3 aspects of the analysis phase. So budget. Do you have money to buy a new tool, or are you only interested in looking at things with the free version or completely free? Those will limit or guide which tools you're able to access. Also, how much time do you have to spend exploring different tools? You might just have to take one at a time. Technical things. We talked about devices earlier. Someone brought up the issue that many students bring different devices to class. We have gone through the BYOD stage of teaching, bring your own device, which is one way to address the situation where there's not a classroom set of laptops, computers, or tablets available. Bring your own device. Smartphones have come a long way, as I'm sure we all know. So what hardware is available? Which applications will work on which hardware? There are a lot of things that don't work well on mobile, unfortunately, still. A lot of our LMSs don't. Avenue, for example, the Moodle-based one, works pretty well on a mobile device if you can read that small. Software. Do you have integrations that you need to be aware of? For example, if you work at an institution that has an established LMS, which is a learning management system, we, for example, use Desire to Learn, D2L, Brightspace. A lot of people use Moodle. There's also Canvas, and I think WebCT is done. So there are a lot of LMSs. If you need to embed your tools inside your LMS, like, for example, Flipgrid, which is a video discussion board, or VoiceThread, you need to be aware how those will interact. Does anyone use H5P? H5P is a fantastic tool for building things. How does it interact with your LMS? Can you pull the recording or the grades in, and does it parse it out properly? Those are important things to do. It works better in some than others. So here is a tool that is a very basic tool, and it's available for download. I'll give you the link later. Just some basic questions. It doesn't have to be a 3-week process. Think about these questions for audience. Who will be using the tool? What's their range of language ability? What are their accessibility needs? And what are their digital literacy skills? What are your outcomes? What skills do you want this tool to address? When will they use it? Is it a class or at home? Because that makes a difference about which tool you use. Because if they're only using it asynchronously outside without teacher facilitation, you need to choose a tool that is very, very intuitive. Or you'll be spending all your time on the phone or on WebEx trying to explain it. Where will the students use the tool? Will they have adequate internet? All of those kinds of things are important for your outcomes. And your constraints for you and your selection process. Do you have a budget? Does it need to be integrated? And what internet and devices will be available for both you and your learners? And other notes, of course, because there's always other considerations that pop up. So that is analysis in a nutshell at light speed. But now let's talk about curation. Now, curation is different from just straight up collection. I'm sure you have lists. I have lists. I have lists that are listing lists, like lots of lists, because we like to collect, we like to hoard all of the information. But we have to go a step further if you want to save time in the long run. Curation is picking the best of the best, or what's most useful for you, not just everything that exists everywhere. So because you're excited about one tool, it might not be the best tool. However, it might be useful down the road. So if it is a good tool, add it to your curated list. It helps you survey your options, but it doesn't cause you to be attached to just one tool. If you've ever heard of the capsule wardrobe, it follows a similar pattern. You pick a few of the best from each category and you collect those, and then you pull them out when you need them. And I suggest you do these by 2 ways. First by context and then by categories. Now, I don't have a list. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't have a list of all the digital tools for teaching. So if you are hoping for that, I am so sorry. That is not what I'm going to give you, because a list that long would essentially be useless. You might as well do a Google search because there's no context. There's no reason. It's just a big, big, big list. So instead of that, I recommend you curate by context. Keep your context. Is this for a digital literacy course? And Marco, I know you're in there. You might not be listening, but if you are, I'm about to embarrass you a little bit, because your curated list of digital literacy resources for newcomers is fantastic. And here it is. I'll just show it to you. One of our projects is on there, so I'm extra super proud that we made it on there. But here is a curated list of digital literacy training opportunities for newcomers. We've got by location. We've got by type. Is it in person or online? We've got online, self-directed, by theme. So you see the difference between just a big list and a curated list. One of the biggest things here is it's by context. There's very specific reasons for making this list. There's links and there's a little bit of information, because I make lists and then I forget why I put something on a list. So you need a way, a system for adding notes. Keep it relevant to your context. Again, it's too easy just to pop everything on there. Everything good goes on there, but not everything is good for every context. So keep it relevant to your context and update it regularly, because as I think someone mentioned in the introduction, light speed, technology is just moving forward and we need to keep up. The next thing to remember is to keep it updated by category. I recommend making a framework, adding categories, and adding tags. This is fun. I find this fun because you can organize your list. I'm going to give you an example of one that I'm in the midst of developing. It's not complete, and you can have access to this version in the Google Drive. But here I've been making slowly a list of tools for instructional design in the area of video development. Please note how specific that context is. The more specific or the more relevant the context, the more useful the list will be, or the curated list will be. So here I've added a category, cost, and a license as my defining columns here. And then I add notes about what is this tool good for. For example, Adobe Premiere Pro, has anyone used that? Love that tool. Is it good for everything? No, because the minimum editing time in Adobe Premiere Pro is going to be an hour. And we only have so many hours in the day. So that might not be best for simple projects. For example, if you just want to walk your students through how to log in, screencast away. I think I have two tools here that I like, Screencast-O-Matic and Loom. One has a free, Loom, for example, has a free professional license for all teachers. So if you are an instructor or in education, you can get a free, completely unwatermarked free version of that tool. And I have all these notes in here, how they're useful, when they're not useful, and so on and so forth. One thing that's important to note is that some tools are not free, for example, Loom, but they have a limited free version, which is good enough for your context. Don't discount those tools, put them in there, just make notes that it is a limited free version. One thing that is useful about an Excel spreadsheet, I like Excel for some of my lists, is that you can add a filter view. I'm just going to take you through one of these, which means that let's say this list gets pretty long, this curated list gets to the hundreds, and I only want to see things that are about audio. Then what I can do is just get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of that. And there we go. Only the audio ones will show up, and I can choose from that list of 3. And I've got 3. I've got 2 editing audios and Murph, which is an AI semi-decently priced AI voice recorder. So you put your text in, it spits out someone reading it in, they have multiple accents and genders. So it's a good tool. Okay, so that is curating, not collecting, but curating. Adding categories and tags can be pretty important, just so that you can find the things that you want. Here are some other tools for curating. The most basic, but for some people, the most useful is just a simple Word document in whatever shared folder you have. A list, or a blog post if you have a web version of that. That can be really good. Treat it like an annotated bibliography if you remember doing those. Those are lots of fun for me. Hopefully they're fun when you're describing tools as well. Spreadsheets, I've already given you an example of how you can use a spreadsheet. And then we have these 3 tools. These are some of my favorite tools for making curated lists: Evernote, Diigo, and Wakelet. These links, please feel free to explore them at your leisure. But Evernote can integrate with the Microsoft Suite, which is why it's on there. And you can make stacks, categories, and tag different things. That means if you just want something that is, for example, for CLB 8, or let's just say CLB 3, you've tagged it CLB 3, you click on the tag, and it will show you all of the digital tools that are applicable for that tag. So it's a great way to find different things. The same thing with Diigo. You can organize, and even better, you can annotate. So if you download the extension for Diigo onto Firefox or Chrome, it lets you highlight web pages and add notes. So that way, you don't even have to download anything. You can just keep tabs on web pages that you have highlighted and added notes. The notes part is important because often I will forget why why was that important? I don't remember. It's 3 months down the road. So add a note, highlight things on the website, and it collates and collects all of it for you in a curated list. Wakelet is another one, very attractive tool, very intuitive to use. You just add links, you can add evaluations, you can add notes, and it looks kind of like a Padlet if you remember Padlet at all, which is another great tool for using in class. Interestingly enough, these curation tools are also useful tools for classroom activities. If you are making lists with your class for any kind of activity, you can use these tools. They have acceptable, satisfactory free versions for use. Other curation tools: Pinterest, Padlet, a Miro board, and Figma. Those are all have good free versions that can be used for curation or for classroom activities. And last but not least is evaluation. So what is important to you when you're selecting a tool? Just pop your ideas in the chat. What do you consider when you select a tool for use in instruction? Okay, is it user-friendly? The device compatibility, yes. Customizable use of features? And how will learners interact with the tool, and what are the learning outcomes planned? Yeah, absolutely. The digital skills, digital literacy continues to be an important thing. I have a vested interest in that as we developed eSkills. Very important for security, for privacy, and even just for accessibility. Visually appealing, we often underestimate the importance of visually appealing. I mean, we have seen lots of, they're generally called ESL, grammar sites or reading sites or just general skills sites that are kind of ugly. And it's hard to find the right thing. It's not just about how pretty it is. It also has an impact about headings and bullet points, about finding the information that people need. Absolutely. Well, I am going to tell you as well that when you're evaluating, the 3 things that I think are the most important to evaluate are instructional goals, the user experience, which lots of people mentioned, and the integrations, which is device compatibility, for example. So first, with instructional goals, we want to make sure that whatever tool we're using aligns with the learning outcomes, that it is inclusive. I mean, that's a quick scan of a tool. You look at the pictures that they choose. Are they all the same corporate white guys in suits? Or is there some diversity? And I have some great links if anyone is interested afterwards for websites for finding diverse representation in photos. There's some websites that show people with different abilities, that show people of different sizes and colors. And that's important. You can learn a lot about a tool just by some of the pictures that they choose. Are people represented in the tool? Is it scalable? Now, what I mean by scalable is, can you use this tool with a small group of people, or with a large class, or with a program? That might be important to you, right, in the long run. Let's talk about a tool, for example, Google Drive. Does anyone use the Google Suite with their students? Yeah, it's a fantastic tool. I mean, I'm using Google Drive to share some of these things with you because the privacy options are a little bit easier to navigate than OneDrive for external people external to our institution. One thing we tried to do once, a long, long time ago, was to create PBLA portfolios using Google Drive. Now, I just want you to think about that for a class of 20 learners. Creating and helping students to create a PBLA folder within Google Drive might not be that big of a deal. Sure, it took work, but for 20 learners, not the end of the world. Now imagine trying to scale that to 80 learners in an online only course with one instructor. That becomes a little bit more difficult. It's not incredibly scalable as a resource, as a tool for portfolio work. However, there are other tools like Flipgrid. Let's talk, has anyone used Flipgrid? I think it's actually just called Flip now. Google it if you're interested in a video discussion board that has patterned itself after social media. It has some good privacy things in place. Flipgrid is, it looks like Instagram, but for video, if that's the best way I can describe that. People record videos, they can choose to record audio without recording their face. They can add notes, and then they can post, people can like and comment with video or audio on each other's work. This one is more scalable than other things because you can have different classes within. You can copy a class content without the responses and move it to a new class. So it's scalable. You can use it for large and small groups and for new programs, new groups as well. Does it have assessments? Has anyone used TED Ed? I've just got a list in my head. TED Ed is fantastic. However, the assessments are built into TED Ed. So if you use that tool, you choose a YouTube video, you make questions, and it spits out an assessment at the end. Great tool because it does all the coding for you. However, the assessment is built in there. So it may not communicate with your LMS. You might have to manually take the grade and input it into your LMS or your grade book. So are assessments important to you, or is this just an interactive self-assessed activity? Content currency and relevance is always important. So double check each tool before using it if it's still current and if it's still relevant, because tools change. Nothing is ever set in stone. And the source credibility and the reputation of the people who put it out. This is especially important when we talk about open educational resources, OERs, which is a great tool because you just pick up whatever part of learning that they've created and drop it into your course or drop it into your learning environment, and you use it as is or with small edits. But you need to make sure that it's a credible source and that their reputation is good. User experience is a whole category unto itself. And I think just by people saying that the use of features, the interaction with learners, the user-friendly, visual appealing, all of those things have to do with user experience. And one of the top things is accessibility. There's a link here to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. I think we're on 2.1 actually right now, but this is the most current website. It has a checklist. I love checklists. Who doesn't love checklists? It's a checklist of things to make sure that you have on the web to make sure it's accessible, which means you don't want any green text on a red background. That is not friendly to people who might have any level of color blindness. Right. And that's an extreme case, but you do see, for style reasons, a very light gray font on a white background. Looks great, but it's not great for accessibility. Also because your monitor is different from everyone else's monitors. Colors show up differently depending on the age and the quality and just the type of device that people have. Accessibility is huge, and I could talk forever about accessibility, but I'll try not to, because although it is very, very important, there is a checklist for everyone to go look at. Compatible devices, someone mentioned it. Thank you for mentioning it because it's so important. Make sure you're choosing an app, a software, a web page, any tool that will work on the devices that you know that your learners will be using. It seems obvious, but we don't often check. I know I'm guilty of this, is I mostly check things on my laptop. I have tried to have a checklist post-it on my wall that says, check it on a Macintosh computer, because I have one, check it on my mobile device, and check it on an iPad as well. Because things look different. Not all tools are created equal when it comes to mobile responsiveness. Internet requirements, I am guilty of making very fancy videos that require a lot of bandwidth because of all the images and interactions that lots of my students in the past have not even been able to open because their internet is so much slower than the one that I have when I'm building it. So make sure that the sites and the tools don't require an excessive internet connection. Most good tools will have it in tiny, tiny letters somewhere on the tool that says you need at least a download speed of 30 megabytes to get it, or something like that. The navigation and the visual design, I think we can intuitively see if that'll work for the most part. And the interaction, does it involve multiple means of interaction, which is the basis of universal design for learning, again, linked. But basically, are there multiple means of expression, of engagement? Is there audio, video, and text? Can students access this in different ways and respond in different ways as well? Finally, integration. How much does it cost? There are some tools I would love to have, but I am sure no budget would ever give it to me. And I am very fortunate because I have a huge suite of tools to work with. Your LMS dictates a lot of what you can and cannot use. The reliability of a site. There are some tools that I've seen that I've never included in my curated lists because while they are really cool, they have a habit of disappearing and reappearing in different places. Their website changes. They're not secure, or they have privacy issues. Like the little lock that you see often, it's not present, or it has a little red slash, which means it's not a secure protocol. And some of these tools will just take too long to learn. The workload is important as well. If you love a tool and you're willing to teach everyone, that's fine. But not everybody wants to spend a whole day getting onboarded to a new tool. Right? Not only for the instructor, if the instructor has a steep learning curve to go on there, just imagine what the students will have to go through when they get to it. Some tools just are not worth the cognitive workload to use them. They require so much explanation. So that is a factor as well. So I have something for you. This is a pretty comprehensive rubric. It's one that I've used, but you are most free to edit it, download it, and use it as you will. It's a checklist because, as we have established, I love checklists with notes. So here is categories. For example, learning outcomes. The tool addresses one or more of the learning outcomes. Inclusivity, scalability, all the things I just talked about are here with a checklist. Okay. So you can use this for your tools. It's not super labor intensive. I recommend doing something like this, even if not this full one, just a couple of notes and add it into your curated list so that you can look back on it and just weigh the pros and the cons of each tool that you're choosing. I also have provided a list of other tools, which may be superior to mine or just simpler. Western University's Our Campus Tech Pudding, which is a great name, Bethany Bovart's WebAIM and EDUCAUSE all have checklists or rubrics for evaluating digital tools for teaching. So these links are all in the PowerPoint as well. Now, one thing after that speed talk that I'd like to point out is that your digital tools for teaching are like arrows or darts. You've got a purpose and you are using that tool. The one thing to remember is that we don't want to just get excited about one tool and forget that every tool has a purpose. So you don't want to throw your arrow and then draw your target around it. You don't want to take a tool and then try to smash it into your instruction because it's not seamless. It doesn't work. People will notice that it doesn't work with the outcomes. So instead of doing that, we should analyze our goals and our resources and our time, and then try to find the tool that best fits that hole in our need, in our gap. So if you have any questions, I will turn off my PowerPoint in a second so I can answer them. But just so that you know, the Google Drive is here, linked here. And here's a short at your URL. If anyone wants to scribble that down, I've included the PowerPoints, all of the resources that I've talked about. My email address is lmanimtim@rrc.ca. If you can get past my last name, you are more than welcome to send me an email. I'm also on Twitter and I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you search me, you will find me somewhere. You're more than welcome to contact me if you have any questions. So I will stop sharing now and just ask if anyone has any questions. I do not guarantee an answer, but definitely I will try.
Well, I can get started. I have one. Definitely. I know it can be difficult for people to find the time to curate their own list of resources, especially if they're not working with an instructional designer. You know, they're already trying to follow a lot of the guidelines in PBLA and a lot of other demands that are placed on teachers. Do you think that there is room, depending on the relationship, I guess, for program administrators to support you in your tool curation? Is it possible to work together with your management team to help and I think minimize the number of tools you have to sort through and help curate what you would like to work with?
Do you mean in general or with me specifically?
I think in general.
In general, yes. Yes, I do. I think this is a collaborative piece that needs to be emphasized. I think lots of people, and I think we've gone over this with PBLA, especially with artifacts, collecting of skill using and skill building tasks, that most places have a repository, right? Where we just move things into it. And the problem is that these repositories get so large and there's no consistency among the things that go in, right? I think this is something that everyone wrestles with, that they just put things there and then it's actually shorter just to recreate it than to go look through everything for what you need. So I think the first step is to create a structure for organizing these curated lists. You have to create the structure so people aren't just dropping things into a big folder. I know this sounds really, it might not sound super helpful, it might sound really obvious, but I'm just thinking in terms of, let's just take the links to skill using tasks as an example. If there's a folder or a curated list with specific tags, and the tags would be under review or ready for use. Those are the first two tags, so that people know which ones to look for first and which ones still need to be reviewed. And then by theme and then by skill. Even just adding those tags would help people find things more quickly. And I think administration does have a role in organizing and facilitating that process, because instructors have a wealth of experience. They just don't have time to make sure all of those things are in the right place. So there needs to be sort of a funnel where all of these resources come. There's a process for suggesting resources, and then a process for evaluating them, and a process for publishing them. Yes, it's a lot of work, but yes, I think it needs to be done. And this kind of thing that, Marco, I hate to pick on you, or I like picking on you, because Marco's done a fantastic job of pooling some of, especially the digital resources together in curated lists. And we need more of that. And there's not an easy answer to that question. It's just something that we all need to put more time towards.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, this is Sally. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very informative and I learned a lot myself. I was just wondering, who are your audience? Are you talking about these tools only to the college or higher level language learners?
My audience, where I work, no. I work with instructors who are stage 1, stage 2, and ESP. So audiences of all levels and all goals.
So including the lower level language learners, you said level 1. So it's kind of a literacy or the stage 1 or CLB learners?
Yes.
Thank you.
You were talking about the simple tools actually, and it brought me back to Flash Player. I know it's been a few years since.
So that's traumatic. Let's not bring up Flash Player.
I was wondering, did you notice a gap though? Because seemingly overnight, when Adobe stopped supporting it, it cut, like a bunch of tools just disappeared off the face of the planet. Is there still a gap there? Or do you think other tools, other simple tools, have come in to take its place?
I think other simple tools have come in. The problem is the publicity of them. Yes, Flash was so annoying. And the reason why I think Flash is a good thing it's gone, and some people might disagree with me, and I'll fight you on it like I will for Poutine, is because it was so hard for learners to access. There was so many security permissions, and they always had to click allow, 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 and no one ever did it. So I don't feel the lack of Flash particularly. because I think a lot of people have moved to HTML5, which I think is far superior in terms of accessibility. H5P for me has filled the gap that Flash did, that Flash left, because you can create things really quickly. And there is a wonderful bank on Avenue of H5P activities, in particular for the language sector. I'm thinking really language sector rather than just general Flash activities. But I think H5P and HTML5 are filling that gap.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a question, actually, Whitney.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Linda. Really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. I work at the Literacy Center of Expertise, and we've been developing a lot of HTML5 activities to use with our low-level literacy learners. And it's been quite a challenge, to learn the tools. We use iSpring, just getting started with Articulate Storyline. Do you foresee a day when instructors will be able to easily create activities without having that extensive ID experience in terms of the tools, and just be able to quickly post stuff for their class? Because I think one of the challenges, we often get people asking us, how do you do this? How do you do this? But having a website, having to post it on there is quite maybe outside the scope of a lot of people. So what do you think about the future in that regard?
Well, that's a really good question. Since I want to keep my job, I think you'll never be able to do it without an instructional designer. No, but really, no. Kudos to you for Articulate Storyline. That is a beast of a program, but the things you can do so much. Here's what I think will happen. I think that instructors' workloads will continue to be large. I think that's just a fact of life as an instructor. I think the role of instructional designers should increase. I think we should have more of them. I would love to have a community of practice of language sector instructional designers. That would be so fun and also so beneficial, I think, as we share best practice, good practice, any practice with each other and any resources that we have. What I think will be the divide, I think complex and time-consuming activities building with an Articulate Storyline, with LMSs, I think those will continue to be developed by people who have dedicated time to develop them, whether it's a curriculum, content, or instructional designer. I think those should stay there because you need, a narrow focus and lots of time, as I'm sure you know. I think H5P is a user-friendly, instructor-friendly tool. So if you can get your hands on it, I highly recommend that for instructors to start building with. I think between the two of them, you have practice simplified interfaces for H5P that still spit out really nice interactivity online. But then you have things like Adobe Captivate and Articulate Rise and Storyline that you can create entire experiences and environments and simulations. Those ones, you just need more time and training to be able to do those. So I think instructors should guide the creation of the learning experiences, but should have access to tools like H5P. Whereas instructional designers, content developers, and curriculum developers should have access to Articulate Rise, to the more complex ones, to be able to build them in more detail. And hopefully, between those two parallel tracks, an environment, an ecosystem of accessible resources will be developed, optimistically.
Thank you.
Okay, so if no one has any other questions, thank you, Linda, for joining us. That was a stellar presentation. We really, really appreciate it. We will be sharing your presentation materials and the links that you gave us with our community in the coming days and weeks. So we hope that lots of people will be able to take advantage of those and start curating their own list of materials. If anybody has any further questions, Linda did include her contact information at the end of her presentation, or you can reach out to us after the session is over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to present today.
Okay, so our next session is going to be in just about 15 minutes at 11 o'clock. We're going to be joined by Alison Heath and Astrid Vanderpool. They're going to be presenting on literacy instruction and online materials. So please feel free to step out, take a break, come back in 15 minutes, and we'll pick up with our second presentation. Thank you.